What's up, world? I'm Cameron McKinney, and this is Pop Culture Spotlight, a podcast about the movie Challengers. Here's a quick synopsis. Best friends and aspiring tennis players Art Donaldson and Patrick Zweig both fall for the same girl, Tashi Duncan, who is destined for tennis stardom. The film stars Zendaya, Mike Faist, and Josh O'Connor. Standout performances. Zendaya's television career has been defined by her two-time Emmy-winning performance in Euphoria as Rue. And when it comes to her film career, most look at her work in giant franchise movies, the Spider-Man films with Tom Holland, and the Dune movies with Timothée Chalamet. Other notable performances include The Greatest Showman and Malcolm and Marie. Challengers is a big movie for the former Disney star for a number of reasons. Number one being she's the big name of the movie. She's the selling point. The other being she's working with Luca Guadagnino, a brilliant director. I have to imagine a big selling point for her to be in this movie is playing a complicated character like Tashi Duncan. I could see people having extreme feelings about this person. Some will hate her, some will love her, and some will understand the character's actions. I personally loved her in Malcolm and Marie, but this takes the mantle as the best film performance of her career. She leaves you wondering whether her character is innocent or manipulative. I'm not sure what's next for Zendaya, but I hope it includes season 3 of Euphoria, along with a 4th Spider-Man movie and Dune Messiah. Euphoria is an interesting show to talk about because it's turned so many actors into big stars, yet the show might not get a proper finale. That sounds wild, but I mean, how long can we wait? These people can't play high schoolers anymore, and you can't go 10 years later on a show like Euphoria. I'm just really curious to see if we're ever going to get a Euphoria series finale. The show's so big and the actors have become so famous, why don't they just do a movie ending? I feel like that's the way to go. A lot of people would go to the theaters to see a Euphoria finale. Josh O'Connor became a big name for his Emmy-winning portrayal of Prince Charles in The Crown. The only film prior to Challengers that I've seen him in was Autumn de Wilde's Emma, and it's impossible not to be impressed with his performance in Challengers. He plays Patrick Zweig, a tennis player who never hit big. He's a lot of things in this movie. He's confident in his abilities. He's a sad figure because he won't move on with his life. He's a rare figure in sports movies because usually the films are about athletes who overcome and make it big. If you're looking for that in this character, you're not going to find it. I will also say he's not the easiest character to root for. O'Connor will next star in The History of Sound with Paul Mescal. Now that's a movie I'm really interested in, to see two young actors in the prime of their career come together. And finally, Mike Faist was the breakout star of Steven Spielberg's West Side Story as the rebellious Riff. In Challengers, he plays Art Donaldson, who in my opinion is the hardest role of the movie because there's a lot of ambiguity to the character. I think he's given the least amount of things to do, and yet Feist still gives a brilliant performance. I also think you leave this movie asking yourself, is Art a good guy? I walked away thinking he's the most honest character in the movie. He's upfront about what he wants in life. He's done playing tennis. He's making that crystal clear. He would be content living a normal life. Feist will next appear in Jeff Nichols' The Bike Riders. This is a movie I can't wait for. Tom Hardy, Jodie Comer, and Austin Butler. Sign me up for that immediately. It's been far too long for a Jeff Nichols movie. If you've seen director Luca Guadagnino's past films, A Bigger Splash with Tilda Swinton, Ray Fiennes, and Dakota Johnson, Call Me By Your Name with Timothée Chalamet, Armie Hammer, and Michael Stuhlbarg, and Bones and All starring Chalamet, Taylor Russell, and Mark Rylance, you know that these movies are vastly different, yet there are commonalities that make them feel like they were made by the same filmmaker. These movies are about interpersonal relationships, the good and bad things about them. And the word I would use to describe his movies emotionally are raw. It might sound silly to say this, but his movies are really a vibe. From the beautiful looks to the scores, if you love plot-heavy movies, he's not the director for you. And with Challengers, he once again proves his ability to get great performances from young actors. In the past, you have Dakota Johnson in A Bigger Splash, Timothée Chalamet in Call Me By Your Name, Taylor Russell and Chalamet in Bones and All, and now 3 terrific performances from Zendaya, Josh O'Connor, and Mike Faist. And I expected 3 really good performances from those actors, but a lot of the times in his movies, these performances come out of nowhere. I mean, nobody knew what to expect from Timothée Chalamet from Call Me By Your Name. Nobody knew that we were watching the next big movie star, but Luca Guadagnino kind of turned him into that with that movie. It got him his first ever Oscar nomination. It put him on the map. And a lot of people feel like Dakota Johnson's best performance of her career was in A Bigger Splash. Guadagnino's next movie is Queer, starring Daniel Craig and Drew Starkey. Starkey I've seen in the show Outer Banks. And again, this is another case of I've got to see this movie to see if he's going to turn another young actor into a legitimate movie star. I mean, pairing him with Daniel Craig is exciting enough. But to see if he can turn another young actor into a major movie star, I think that's a major selling point of a Luca Guadagnino movie. Let's talk about Challengers as a sports movie. I view it as a brilliant movie about the sport of tennis because while these 3 characters are linked at the end of the day, it's a sport about individuals. It also puts the spotlight on the fact that tennis players, for the most part, retire at an early age, and that's what the art character is dealing and thinking about throughout the film, what his long life with tennis is going to be. The film has also been deemed by many as sexy, and I don't have much to say about that. I think it just comes down to the fact that the 3 leads are good-looking people. And who's to say if that aspect of the movie has been oversold? Like, this isn't some erotic thriller. I just think the stars themselves are selling that aspect of the movie. What impressed me most about the movie Challengers is how it juggles the timeline. It goes back and forth 15 years, and the characters actually look like and feel like they've aged, and the 3 actors deserve a tremendous amount of credit for pulling that off. I usually hate when movies have other actors play the older versions of characters, but I understand it because it's hard to believe that a younger actor looks 15 years older than they actually are. But Zendaya pulls it off as Tashi, Mike Faist pulls it off as Art, and Josh O'Connor pulls it off as Patrick. They feel older. The characters feel like they've actually been through something. And it's not just about the looks. They actually feel like they've been through something emotionally. Like the character of Art feels like the toll of being a tennis star has affected him personally, and he's done doing it. Whereas in the beginning of the movie, you can feel his exuberance for the sport. It's what he wants. It's the life he wants to live. I love the dichotomy of the 2 different arts in this movie. Box office. So far, Challengers has made $53 million, which in my opinion is a decent number for an original movie. I could have seen it doing better because of the Zendaya factor and due to the fact that there was online hype for the movie. But I think what we're finding out in these last few months is that online hype means absolutely nothing for the selling of a movie. Everyone was talking about Monkey Man on Twitter, and then that movie came and went, and it did decent numbers at the box office, but it wasn't a hit by any measuring tool. And that same thing is kind of happening with Challengers. It's a movie that cost $50 million. So far, it's made $53 million. It's going to make a decent amount of money. Maybe it's going to get to $85-90 million. But I think some people viewed this as a movie that was going to make over $100 million, and that we were going to walk away saying Zendaya is now a major movie star. And I think she is a major movie star. I think that part of the equation is true. I just don't think that these kind of movies are absolute hits anymore. And if we're being honest, I don't know what is a hit anymore. The Fall Guy with 2 of the biggest movie stars on planet Earth, Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, isn't doing very well at the box office. I have high hopes for Furiosa at the box office, but I don't know what kind of numbers that movie is going to do at all. Deadpool and Wolverine is the only upcoming film that I know is going to crush it at the box office because it has Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. Wolverine, and because it has Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. Everything else feels like a pleasant surprise or a bit of a disappointment. There seems to be no more in between. There never seems to be, oh, this movie made exactly what we thought it was going to do. It's either that number is higher than we all expected or that number is lower than we all expected. And I feel like in the case of Challengers, that number for some people is lower than expected. But to take it through a positive spin, I feel like the actors involved in this movie are going to have their own box office success because of this movie. I feel like Mike Faist is going to develop into somebody that's going to have box office success because people are going to go back and say, well, he was great in West Side Story. Now he's great in Challengers. I can't wait to see what he does next. Maybe he's going to get some big time leading role because of this performance. The same for Josh O'Connor. Now people know who this guy is. And I'll say this about Zendaya. If she wasn't the lead of this movie, it would be nowhere near $53 million already. I think this is a good box office showing for this movie, not a great one. Oscar chances. I'm really fascinated by how this movie will fare during awards season. Everyone's saying that Zendaya has a real shot to get her first ever Oscar nomination, and I want to believe that. I desperately want to believe that, and it makes sense to me. She's already a 2-time Emmy Award winner. Movies really want to turn her into a megastar, and one of the ways you do that is to give her a well-deserved Oscar nomination. I think she deserves an Oscar nomination for her performance as Tashi Duncan. It's a complicated character. She carries the movie at times. But I say all that, and it's still only May. There are going to be so many other performances coming later in the year. It's hard for me to pencil in Zendaya as one of the 5 best actresses at the end of the year. I mean, this could be a case of a movie that gets forgotten over time, especially if it doesn't reach that $100 million plateau. If it's not thought of as a box office sensation, then the movie might end up being forgotten. One of the reasons I do believe she has a legitimate chance is because of Dune 2. I think the success of that movie, plus with this performance, that can get an actor a nomination, having 2 really good performances in 1 year. Mike Faist and Josh O'Connor should also be in the conversation for Best Leading Actors, but do I see them getting nominations? Absolutely not. If Mike Faist wasn't going to get a nomination for West Side Story, I find it hard to believe he's going to get one for his performance in Challengers. And the same with Josh O'Connor. They're just not there yet. Why I believe Zendaya has a real chance? Because this has been building over the years. It feels time for Zendaya to get her first ever Oscar nomination, and I feel like Challengers is the perfect movie to do so. It's the first time she's the biggest name on the call sheet. It's not a streaming movie like Malcolm Marie. Now feels like the time for Zendaya to get that first Oscar nomination. I don't know what Luca Guadagnino has to do to get a Best Director nomination. It should have happened by now. I mean, I could have made the argument he should have got nominated for A Bigger Splash. He definitely should have got nominated for Call Me By Your Name, and possibly Bones and All. I don't really understand what happened with the Bones and All of it all. I really like that movie. I know it's about 2 cannibals falling in love, but that movie is a wild ride that more people need to watch. He feels underrated to me, and maybe it's because he makes smaller movies, but they're so good and they are memorable. I mean, people are still talking about Call Me By Your Name. That movie hit the zeitgeist. I feel like Challengers is a movie that's being talked about. He's a noticeable director, and I think it's time for people to give him proper recognition. I like this movie a lot, but I feel like Best Picture is out of the conversation. I do feel like a screenplay nomination is in play. I do think this is one of those movies when you'll look back in 15 years and you'll go, wow, I can't believe they got all 3 of these actors in the same movie. And those are the movies I love, where in the moment you don't realize how big actors are going to become. It's like Anthony Minghella talented Mr. Ripley. We didn't know how big Jude Law was at the moment. We didn't know how big Matt Damon was going to become. Gwyneth Paltrow, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Cate Blanchett. I I mean, those actors at some point became bigger than that movie. And I feel like that's what's going to happen with Challengers. Yes, we know how big Zendaya is, but I think we're going to be like, wow, I can't believe Mike Faist and Josh O'Connor were in the same movie. That's how good I believe these actors are, and that's how famous I believe that they are going to become. After watching this movie, how could anyone be surprised if any of these three become Oscar winners in the next 10 years? I think it's going to happen for Zendaya. At some point, she's too good of an actress. Mike Faist just continues to work with great directors, Steven Spielberg, Luca Guadagnino, Jeff Nichols. He's going to be given a role that gets him a coveted Oscar, and I feel the exact same way about Josh O'Connor. I guess what I'm wondering with Zendaya, is this now a turning point for her career? Like, are we at the back end of her work in franchises? Is Dune Messiah going to be her last big movie? Is the Spider-Man 4 going to be her last superhero movie? Is she now going to make more movies like Challengers? And I do believe that's the right direction for her career to go, to start working with the directors like Luca Guadagnino. Or are they going to give Zendaya her own action franchise? Like, I could just see it going in either direction. Either way, she's going to be a massive name and she's going to have massive success. But if I had to choose between the two career paths, I feel like the way it's going is the way of Challengers. Like, I think this is more of what Zendaya is going to do in the future. I think Euphoria is clearly almost over. The Spider-Man movies are almost over. And after Dune Messiah, I don't know how many big franchises Zendaya is going to be a part of in the future. I think she's going to use those franchises to make movies like Challengers. I don't know if independent movies are going to be in her future because the studios are banking on Zendaya and they're going to give her a lot of offers to be in bigger movies. It's possible she finds a balance between the two to make movies like Dune Messiah and Challengers. I say this with all due respect to the Marvel movies. I'm just glad that we're in a place where we don't see two young actors like Mike Faist and Josh O'Connor and immediately go, we have to get them in the next Marvel movie. I feel like that stage of that phase is over for us all. I don't want to see Mike Faist play a superhero. I don't want to see Josh O'Connor play a superhero. I want to see them do really good work with really good directors and be in really good looking movies, which is what Challengers is. Overall, Challengers is one of the best movies of the year, led by a rising movie star and possibly two future movie stars. I knew going into it that these three actors were the main attraction. I knew it was going to be all about Zendaya, Mike Faist, and Josh O'Connor. I just had no idea how much of the movie they were. All three of them are the entire movie. There are no other characters. They carry the entire movie on their backs. There's not a lot of interactions with side characters, and I think that's super impressive that they were able to carry that off from an acting standpoint. Usually when young actors are the leads of movies, they surround them with character actors like Willem Dafoe or someone like that. No, this movie is just Zendaya, Mike Faist, and Josh O'Connor, and they carried it just as well as any big name actor would have. And the last thing I'll say about it is I hope at the end of the day it does become a major Oscar contender. I hope Zendaya does get her first ever Oscar nomination for this performance as Tashi Duncan. I think it's a performance worthy of recognition. I said this on the podcast about Dune Part 2. She's just an actress who's able to convey her emotions without saying tons of dialogue, and I find that quality so rare in a young actor. And the real trick of the movie is you don't know which of the two male characters her character is in love with. That's the mystery of the film. I think Challengers is going to be a movie that we talk about for a long time, not only because these actors are only going to get more and more famous, because it's a movie worth talking about. People are going to have different opinions about it. And there are going to be strong opinions about the likability of the characters in the film. I also think its reputation as a sports movie will only grow over time. Like, I've only seen it once, so I can't put it up there with like like the likes of Moneyball, but I think if I see it multiple times, it will only grow in my mind because it's a movie about the characters. It's not necessarily about the sport of tennis. It's about the characters of Tashi, Art, and Patrick. Thanks for listening to this edition of Pop Culture Spotlight. I'm Cameron McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Thursday on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I highly recommend you check out the movie Challengers. Next week on the podcast, I'm talking about Jerry Seinfeld's star-studded comedy Unfrosted. So tune into that and please rate, review, and subscribe.